How do you go on when you've lost everything? For Alex Quinlan, the answer was to search for the truth. For 10 years, the ghost of that horrific night was her only motivation. But as the truth gets closer, it brings with it a pain greater than loss itself. Is it worth trading the last remnants of peace for an answer that could destroy everything? I'm Clyde. Hear this emotional story on the Best Mystery Book Podcast.
Chapter 49. Washington, D.C., Saturday, April 29, 2023, 2:30 p.m. Tracy Carr sat cross-legged on the bed of her hotel with her hotel laptop in front of her, comfortably in work mode with headphones covering her ears, a pen between her teeth, and hair pulled up in a bun. She was balancing both of her gigs on a hard deadline to deliver a 1,000-word article meant to bring New York Times readers up to date on the latest developments in the Laura McAllister case. She was also putting out content to her social channels to satiate the appetite of the true crime fanatics who followed her. Many of her followers had never picked up a newspaper in their lives and acquired their news or gossip from videos dropped on social media. Tracy had done 2 shoots over the last 2 days. The Laura McAllister case was turning into a true bonanza of a story and was gaining national attention due to the tangential connection to Larry Chadwick, whose potential nomination to fill the SCOTUS vacancy appeared to be unraveling at lightning speed. The fact that Chadwick's son had been floated as potentially being connected to Laura McAllister was true crime that could not be ignored. Now that the girl had turned up dead, the story was exploding across the internet. Still, despite the demand of her social channels and her deadline for the Times, her article was due to her editor in 2 hours and was only half written. Tracy could not shake the encounter she'd had on Friday. In the middle of her report, a woman had stumbled into the chute and collided with her. This, alone, was not unusual. For a beat reporter, dealing with an inept public was part of the job. But the interruption was not what had her mind churning. It was the full woman herself. Tracy refreshed the footage on her computer and rewatched the incident unfold. On the screen, she saw herself delivering her report. And then, from the right side of the screen, the woman with short blonde hair appeared. She was looking to her left, to where other reporters were recording their shoots, and never saw that Tracy was in front of her until they collided. Tracy slowed the footage as the woman walked into the frame. She paused the video at the moment just after the collision, when the woman turned in confusion and looked directly into the camera. Tracy studied the woman. Short blonde hair spiked with product, piercings in her left ear, eyebrows, nose, and lower lip. Tracy zoomed in on the still image, concentrating only on the woman's eyes. They were bright blue, but artificially so, probably made that way by colored contact lenses. Tracy knew those eyes as brown, and when she got past the distractions, it dawned on her. "Holy shit," she whispered to herself. She lifted the laptop off the bed and brought it close to her face. It's empty eyes in the flesh. Chapter 50. Washington, D.C., Monday, May 1st, 2023, 1:55 p.m. "Turn on your television," Alex heard Jacqueline say as soon as Alex answered her phone. "What happened?" "Just turn on one of the local stations." Alex and Jacqueline had been working non-stop since Matthew Claymore was brought in for questioning on Saturday morning. As promised, Jacqueline had yielded enough power to avert a formal arrest until DNA testing came back. A backpack alone, she argued, was not proof of murder. The police had promised an expedited forensic lab run and gave Matthew strict orders not to leave the District of Columbia, or even his parents' house. "Are you watching?" Jacqueline asked through the phone. Alex picked up the remote and clicked the television on. The local NBC station had a breaking news alert with a headline that read, "Arrest made in the Laura McAllister murder investigation." Alex turned up the volume and watched as the news anchor inside the studio handed things over to a female reporter standing outside the gates of McCormack University. We are outside McCormack University, where there has been a break in the Laura McAllister investigation. The student journalist whose body was found early Saturday morning, Laura's boyfriend, Matthew Claymore, was questioned on Saturday morning for several hours before being released. Now, just moments ago, police have arrested a different man. The Washington, D.C. police chief made a statement indicating that the arrest came after DNA evidence tied the suspect to the murder scene. The report cut to footage of a man, white, middle-aged, with greasy hair, thick glasses, and a salt and pepper scruff, being led from his double-wide trailer. He wore a dirty t-shirt, and his hands were cuffed behind his back as police led him to a squad car and deposited him in the back seat. The man has been identified as Reece Rankin, a 48-year-old Maryland auto mechanic. Police apprehended Rankin at the mobile home park where he lives. Again, police have indicated that DNA evidence has linked Rankin to the crime scene, but are saying no more at this time, other than they are confident they have their man. We hope to learn more during a scheduled news conference later this afternoon. The footage cut back to the studio anchor, and Alex muted the television. "Who is he?" Alex asked. "Just a random," Jacqueline said. "I don't know more than what I just watched with you. Matthew's parents called me when they heard. No word from the police. No apology. No statement that Matthew had been wrongly accused." "So goddamn typical. I'm heading to see him now." "Okay," Alex said in a hesitant tone. "Are you buying it?" "Buying what?" "That a random auto mechanic from Maryland wound up at McCormack University and just happened to rape and strangle a student journalist who was about to drop an explosive story about the university and the Greek system it supports." The silence from the other end of the line was evidence that Jacqueline, too, doubted the sudden conclusion to the Laura McAllister saga. "I agree that this development is surprising, but evidence doesn't lie, Alex. Reece Rankin's DNA was all over the scene. But Reece Rankin is not my concern at the moment. Matthew is, and until he's fully out of the woods on this case, and no longer on the police department's radar, he remains our main priority." Now it was Alex's turn to pause. "Matthew Claymore is our client and our only concern," Jacqueline said. "I got it," Alex finally said. "I hope this nightmare is over for Matthew." "Me too," Jacqueline said. "I'll touch base when I know more." The call ended, and Alex continued to watch the muted television, knowing that either Matthew Claymore had just gotten extremely lucky, or something wasn't quite adding up. Chapter 51. Washington, D.C., Monday, May 15th, 2023, 10:00 a.m. 2 weeks had passed since Reece Rankin, the random drifter from a Maryland trailer park, was arrested and charged with the murder of Laura McAllister. Although there had been no motive for the crime other than a deranged man stalking a college student while she walked a forested trail near campus, the evidence of his guilt was overwhelming. The man had left his DNA all over Laura McAllister's body. It included epithelial cells from where the rope he used to strangle her had frayed away the skin on his hands, pubic hair, and sperm. In addition, fibers recovered from Laura's hair matched a rug that lined the trunk of Rankin's Toyota, and footprints sequestered near Laura's body were an identical match to the man's work boots. It was a certainty beyond a reasonable doubt that this man had strangled and raped Laura McAllister for a reason that appeared to be no more complicated than lust, a lack of self-control, and a complete disregard for life. The press coverage had calmed down since the arrest of Reece Rankin. Of course, there was a breathless, yet brief, dive into the man's background, who he was, where he worked, what his neighbors thought of him. But the interest in Reece Rankin was fleeting, and the media were now on to other sensational stories. The press would circle back to Laura McAllister for brief updates when Reece Rankin appeared in court and when he was sentenced. They would flash photographs of the pretty girl in newscasts and in tabloids, but the media and the public would soon forget about Laura McAllister. A missing girl was more interesting than a dead girl. And a dead girl was interesting only as her killer was on the loose. It was the sad reality of American society. Gory crimes captured the public's interest, especially if they involved young, attractive women. But that curiosity lasted only as long as there was mystery surrounding the gore and the girl. Once the pieces were laid out and the puzzle was assembled, the public's thirst was quenched. Until, another girl went missing, or another family was mowed down in the middle of the night. Then society morphed into a thirsty nomad wandering the desert and denied of water for days. The public would gulp insatiably from any trickle that dripped from the media spigot. True crime had become pop culture, an ugly, circuitous guilty pleasure to which most people were so accustomed as to not even be embarrassed by it. Despite the open and shut case surrounding Laura McAllister, no one had been able to explain how Matthew Claymore's backpack ended up at the crime scene. It was an unknown that kept Lancaster and Jordan active on the case and interested in any new developments as they pertained to their client. During follow-up questions, which took place under the watchful eye of Jacqueline Jordan, Matthew had explained to detectives that Hyde lost his backpack a week earlier. He surmised under questioning that perhaps Laura had taken it accidentally the morning she'd left his apartment, the last time he saw her. The police were less than satisfied with the explanation, but with no other forensic evidence tying Matthew to the crime, they had no choice but to drop him as a suspect. Alex's work on the case was finished, and she had already been assigned to another. Matthew Claymore was in her rearview mirror, but the case had brought her to an interesting crossroads. During her investigation, she had managed to get her hands on Laura McAllister's unaired episode chronicling rape accusations at McCormack University, and that information produced an opportunity. She walked into the Perfect Cup, ordered 2 slow-poured Americanos, and took a seat at the same table where Annette Packard of the Federal Bureau of Investigation had ambushed her a couple of weeks before. Today, however, it was Alex who arranged the meeting and would be doing the negotiating. She was halfway through her Americano when Annette walked in and sat across from her. "Thanks for calling," Annette said. "I was glad you reached out. I got you a coffee." Annette wrapped her hand around the cup. "Thank you. I've thought about your offer. And I think we might be able to help each other. I'm listening. I've managed to get my hands on Laura McAllister's unaired story. Just because Laura was killed doesn't mean her story is dead. It's alive and well, and I'm in the strange position of being the only person with access to it. Well, that's not true. I made a copy of it from a hard drive in McCormack University's recording studio. So the university has the story as well. But the administration at McCormack will bury Laura's story and hope for it to quickly decay. I feel like I owe it to this girl I've never met to make sure that doesn't happen. And trust me, you're going to want to know the details of Laura's story before it goes live. It'll have a direct impact on Larry Chadwick." "Duncan Chadwick was involved?" Alex nodded. "Laura had proof. Well, she wasn't a detective, so proof might be overstating it. But she had damning verification that Duncan Chadwick was the one who purchased a date rape drug called Liquid G, spiked the drinks at his fraternity party, and raped the girl who filed the police report. Laura did a lot of legwork. Her story is big and towering, and its shadow covers many people, including school brass that did their best to keep the story quiet. But as Laura's story pertains to you, Larry Chadwick's son is not only going to come off terribly, but will likely be questioned in regard to the claims made in Laura's story, and possibly charged with rape. If they can trace the purchase of the gamma hydroxybutyrate back to Duncan, and Laura managed to track down the dealer who sold it to him, things will be even worse for him." Annette stayed quiet for a moment, and Alex saw that she was considering her options. "If Laura's story comes out," Annette finally said, "and Duncan is attached to the scandal, It would sink his father's chances of being confirmed to the Supreme Court. If I were made privy to this information before it made it to the mainstream media, I'd have no choice but to advise the president against nominating Larry Chadwick. Come on, Special Agent Packard. You'd be a hero if you sniffed out this story before it made it to the mainstream. You'd be credited with helping the president avoid a potentially embarrassing nomination that would sully his reputation and give his adversaries ammunition leading into the election next year. I can see the political hit job commercials now. How can the American public trust a president who put his faith in Larry Chadwick, a judge whose morals are so skewed that he raised a son to be a rapist? Alex watched Annette carefully and knew that she had planted a realistic scenario. "I'll need proof," Annette said, "about Duncan and the date rape drug and his connection to the girl who was raped. I can't just go to the president with accusations." Laura's story has proof. Or, like I said, strong confirmations. How strong? Strong enough that once Laura's story is out there, the authorities will get involved. The girl already filed a police report. After Laura's story goes mainstream, Duncan will be named as her rapist. The police will investigate, and I'm certain that with the other information Laura uncovered, Duncan will be charged. There's a rape kit, and they'll take a sample of Duncan's DNA to see if it's a match. And the proof, what Laura uncovered, you'll give me. Yes. I created a series of briefs for my boss at Lancaster and Jordan. I can give you those as well as let you listen to the episode Laura was about to drop before I make it public. Even in the extraordinary event that the Chadwick family can flex its political muscle to dodge this bullet and avoid Duncan being arrested or charged, his name will forever be tied to Laura McAllister and a rape at McCormack University. Annette nodded. "Okay, you don't need to sell it any more than you have. I need this information, and I need it soon. So I guess we've reached the quid pro quo part of this conversation. What are you asking in exchange?" Alex took a deep breath. "You ran my prints, which means you know my history. That's what I need help with." "Your history? Meaning what happened when you were a teenager?" "Meaning what happened to my family." Alex had spent the last few days organizing this deal in her mind. The truth was that the search for her family's killer had reached a dead end years ago, when Garrett rescued her from Cambridge and brought her home. Since then, since her discovery of mysterious bank statements hidden in her attic, her trip to the Sparhafen Bank in Zurich, and her discovery of a link between her parents and a sex trafficking businessman named Roland Glazer, Alex had made no real progress in the search for her parents' killer. But the vague similarity between her parents' crime scene and Byron Zell's, in which photos of victims were left by the killer, had stirred the embers that still smoldered inside her. The rousing had been enough to reignite the desire to continue her search. Alex knew this bold attempt was likely her last hurrah. She understood that stirring those last remaining ashes might finally extinguish them for good. But she also knew that with someone like Annette Packard holding the fire iron and poking those dying coals, they might finally combust in a way Alex could never manage on her own. "Alex," Annette said, "I told you before, I ran your prints because I planned to tap you as a source and needed to make sure you had no priors or other red flags that would make you unreliable. Being accused of killing my family might make me unreliable in the eyes of some. You're legally Alex Armstrong now. Your past doesn't matter to me. Either way, you won't be getting Laura's story from me. Technically, you will be, but you'll be able to plausibly claim it came from a reliable source. I don't follow you. I'll give you the details once I have everything squared away. Before I do, though, I want to know if you'll help me." "Help you with what, exactly?" "Figuring out who killed my family." Alex saw the apprehension in her eyes. "How can I help with that?" "You told me that you have the entire justice system at your fingertips. I have access and liberties pertaining to my specialty. Your family and what happened to them, that's not what I specialize in. No, you specialize in digging and investigating and uncovering the truth. You find the right people who can get you what you need, just like I do for my job. But I've used every bit of skill I've ever learned and every instinct I've developed to try to understand why my family was killed. I've made no progress. I need help. And you're the only person who's come along in the last decade who might actually be able to provide that help. Listen, Alex, I looked into your background, and I remember your family's case. I think what happened to you is terrible. I'd love to tell you I can help, but I don't know what I'd be getting into or what I'd be agreeing to do. I need the information you have about Duncan Chadwick, and I need it badly. But I don't want to take that information and promise you something in return that I can't deliver. Alex reached across the table, took Annette's Americano, and dumped it, along with her own, into the trash can next to the table. The coffee here is terrible, Alex said. Come back to my place. I'll brew you some real coffee, and I'll also show you exactly what you're getting into. Chapter 52. Washington, D.C., Monday, May 15th, 2023, 10:50 a.m. Back in her condo, Alex stood next to Annette Packard and pulled the accordion divider to the side, revealing her evidence board and the decade-long journey she'd been on. Alex looked at Annette, who stayed silent as she scanned the board. "What is this?" Annette asked. "This is everything I've ever learned about the night my family was killed. Everything I remember about that night. Everything I've ever dreamed about that night. Every piece of evidence I've ever come across on my own, or from the formal police investigation." Annette continued to scan the board. "Over the years," Alex said, "I've become too close to it. I'm too far into the details to be able to see a pattern, if there is one to see. I need fresh eyes to look at what I've found. I need someone to look at this board with a new perspective, and without my preconceived ideas and biases about that night." Annette squinted her eyes and raised her chin toward the board. "Is that Roland Glazer?" "It is," Alex said. "And he's just one of the many strange pieces in this impossible puzzle." Annette walked slowly toward the board. Alex saw that she had gotten the woman's attention. "How about that coffee you promised?" Annette said without taking her eyes off the board. Alex nodded. "I'll get right on it." An hour later, they each sipped a second vacuum-siphoned Americano while they sat on the couch, the evidence board in front of them. "So," Alex said, "can you help me?" "May. Personally," Annette said. "No, like I said, this," she pointed at Alex's evidence board, "is not what I do. It intrigues me, but that's not the type of investigating I do. However," Annette looked at Alex, "I know someone who can help." "Who?" "An old FBI friend of mine named Lane Phillips. He's a forensic psychologist who used to be one of the Bureau's top profilers. He retired a number of years ago, and now runs a corporation that tracks, if you can believe it, serial killers. And this," Annette pointed to the board again, "is exactly what he does. I can call him and see if he's interested in helping." Annette took a sip of coffee. "So the deal is this. If I can convince one of the FBI's best criminal profilers to take a look at your family's case, you'll share everything Laura McAllister uncovered about Duncan Chadwick before you go public with her story." "Yes," Alex said. "That's the deal." Annette stood up. "Okay, I'll make a call and get back to you." Annette walked toward the front door. Alex opened it for her, and Annette walked into the hallway and then turned. "Just curious about something," Annette said. "You said the information won't come directly from you, but from a credible source. Care to explain that?" "Not yet, but I know someone who might be interested in telling Laura's story on a bigger stage than I could ever provide on my own. Details to come." It was another part of her plan that would either work to perfection or backfire horribly. Chapter 53. Washington, D.C., Monday, May 15th, 2023, 8:30 p.m. Annette Packard poured a Maker's Mark and sat down on her tall couch, Her Columbia Heights apartment was small but comfortable, and her living room window had a partial view of the city lights and a field of the Potomac far off in the distance. In her mid-50s now, she had wondered for the last few years about her earning power. Should she creep from under the comfortable but thin blanket the U.S. government provided? In 3 years, she could retire from the FBI in good standing, with a nice pension, years of energy in front of her, and options. She'd had offers over the years. Many had been attractive. The money alone had always made her listen. She earned $72,000 as a special agent in the FBI. Her role as lead scavenger into the lives of any high-profile political candidate had moved her up the ranks and padded her with power and influence, but had done little to help her bottom line. The U.S. government, and all its subsidiaries, the Federal Bureau of Investigation included, was notorious for hanging awards and titles around the necks of the hardest-working employees, without rewarding them monetarily. The promise of a lifelong pension, however, was the reward for a job well done and a career hard worked. Before she turned 60, Annette would be earning $70,000 a year for simply getting out of bed, and the gravy train would continue for the rest of her life, regardless of whether she took on employment elsewhere. Some of the lucrative offers she'd gotten over the years had come from large corporations that tried to entice Annette Packard and her unique snooping abilities for their private security detail and cyber crimes divisions. Her skill set could be put to good use in corporate America or Wall Street, not only in the hiring of CEOs and other powerhouse executives, but also with opposition research into rival companies and potentially nefarious dealings that ran rampant through the business, financial, and tech industries. The most interesting offer, however, had come from Lane Phillips, a former bureau colleague who had indeed bucked the system to go off on his own. The wild success Lane found in the private sector was the envy of every agent who dreamed of capitalizing on their skills and knowledge to turn their government experience into a lucrative payday. In his heyday, Lane Phillips was the FBI's leading forensic psychologist and criminal profiler. Today's young guns learn the tricks of the trade from Lane's PhD dissertation, a lengthy thesis that forensically dissected the mind of a killer and was appropriately titled, "Some Choose Darkness." It was read so widely through the behavioral science unit inside the FBI that the Bureau turned Lane's dissertation into the main training manual and blueprint to help young psychiatrists and psychologists understand the thought process of serial killers. Lane later turned his exploits into The Minds of Killers, which was based on his personal interviews of over 100 serial killers, into a best-selling true crime memoir. The book sold millions of copies. He followed his best-selling book with a deep and unique dive into studying current and still active serial killers. Lane did this by meticulously analyzing, cataloging, and archiving group murders in the United States. Using his fierce and unrelenting mind, he developed a computer program and progressive algorithm to do this analysis for him. He turned the idea into a private company called the Murder Accountability Project, or MAP, as it was called in the industry. The algorithm proved so proficient at recognizing patterns between previously unrelated homicides that Lane Phillips had been credited with the identification and arrest of dozens of serial killers, formally defined as individuals responsible for the death of 3 or more victims. Dr. Phillips' program became so successful that his services and the artificial intelligence computer algorithm had been licensed by hundreds of police departments and detective bureaus around the country, as well as implemented into the FBI's own database of the criminal offense divisions. Lane's best-selling book had made him comfortably wealthy. The licensing of his computer program that tracked and identified similarities between otherwise unlinked homicides had made him a millionaire many times over. Lane's offer for Annette to come work for him and the Murder Accountability Project had been most enticing. She'd have the chance, Lane had told her, to put her snooping skills to better use than discovering that a businessman who decided to run for public office during a midlife crisis had cheated on his taxes and was currently keeping a mistress half his age. Her work at MAP would have real-world impact. Lane had tried to convince her, and he needed her skills badly. But still, leaving the bureau early would disrupt her pension, so Annette had politely declined Lane's offer. She did, however, agree to reconsider things when she turned 57, and was free to retire from the FBI in good standing. She kept in regular touch with the profiling savant and picked up her phone now to call him. "You've decided to come work for me," she heard Lane say in the way of a greeting. "Not yet," Annette said. "I have to secure my pension first, remember. I'll pay you multiple times what the government is paying you. I'm going to hold you to that promise." "Please do," Lane said. "But if you're not calling about a job, what's up?" "Maybe nothing, but I think I've got an interesting case, well. It's not even a case, really, or anything I'm formally working on. But it is right up your alley, and I need your mind on it." "Do tell." "You remember the Quinlan family shooting from years ago? No. Tell me about them." "A mother, father, and their teenage son were killed in the middle of the night. Mowed down with a shotgun. Gory crime scene. Press went wild with it. The 17-year-old daughter was found holding the shotgun, and the police pinned her for the murders, until the investigation fell apart. Some real bad detective work, and an overly aggressive debauched the hell out of the case. This was in McIntosh, Virginia." "Sure, I remember that now. The press called the girl Empty Eyes. What was her name? Alexandra Quinlan." "That's it. Then she sued the police department. The state of Virginia, actually. Big defamation case that ended with a huge verdict that awarded the girl millions." Yeah, I remember now. What's going on?" "Long story short, this current thing I'm working on, vetting a big-name judge, crossed my path with hers." "With Alexandra Quinlan?" "Yeah, but she doesn't go by that name anymore. You don't need the details, and I'm not at liberty to give them. What I was hoping for was that you'd take a look at the Quinlan family shooting, along with some other leads the girls come across over the years, to see if you can pick up on anything useful." "Useful how?" "The murders are still unsolved. They were pinned on the girl, and when that theory blew up, the case went cold. I suspect no one looked too closely at the case after the debacle with Alexandra Quinlan. But the thing is, she never stopped looking herself." "The Quinlan girl?" "Yes. 10 years later, she's still hard at work trying to figure out who killed her family. She's the only one looking. And it's just as much of an injustice today that no one is helping her as it was a decade ago when she was falsely accused. She could use your help, Lane. And I have a feeling you'll be interested in some of the details she's managed to turn up." "You're starting to excite me," Lane said. "You think there's a serial killing connection to the Quinlan family?" "I have no idea. That's your specialty. But only Dr. Lane Phillips could get away with admitting they were excited at the prospect of a serial killer. Look, it's not my area of expertise, but judging by some of the research Alex has done, and some of the names she's managed to peripherally link to her parents, I think it's worth your time to take a look. She's collected all her research and put together a board of the highlights. I took a picture of it, and I want to send it to you. It'll be enough to get you started. If you find anything interesting, I'm sure I can get my hands on all her other research." "Send it," Lane said. "I'll take a look and get back to you." "Thanks, Lane." "How, exactly, did you get pulled into this?" "The girl can help me with a time-sensitive case I'm working on. We agreed to swap favors. It would be a huge help if you came through for me on this." "Happy to take a look. I'll consider it pro bono work," Lane said. "But if I turn up anything, you come work for me. If you're able to figure this out, I'll put in my 2 weeks that very day." "Careful what you promise," Lane said. Part V. Revelations. This killer has been at it for much longer than 10 years. Lane Phillips. Camp Montague, Appalachian Mountains. The day after he hid behind Jerry Lawlon's cabin and concocted his plan was the start of Trek Week, the time each summer when the entire camp made a 3-day, 50-mile, round-trip journey down the Muskogee River. Each night, the kids of Montague set up camp next to the riverbank with the supplies they brought with them. Counselors were present, but the fifth years were in charge. They were responsible for assigning the campers to canoes, for leading them all downriver, for setting up camp each night, and for providing dinner. It was a coming of age for those who had been with Camp Montague the longest, and a chance for the fifth years to show off their years of experience. Only 2 counselors accompanied the campers on the 3-day trek, and they were very much in the background. Their presence was nearly undetectable, for the purpose of the expedition was to build unity among the kids and allow leaders to rise to the top. But he and the other fifth years had spent the previous week making plans, and now they were executing the departure from camp. They had all the students assigned to groups, and everyone was in their canoes. 3 to a boat, for a total of 30 canoes. He made sure she was in his group. It was just after 3:00 p.m. on Monday by the time they made it to the first base camp. It was an hour later before everyone had their canoes secured on dry land, their tents assembled, and a campfire roaring. Barbecue grills were present at each of the base camps, and the fifth years got busy lighting the charcoal and preparing dinner. By 8:00 p.m., everyone was fed, and they started their nightly ritual around the campfire, just as if they were back at the main camp. He took a seat next to her and smiled. "How are you doing?" It was the first time they'd spoken all summer. "Good," she said. "Blisters?" She looked at her hands. Yeah, a couple small ones." "We have gloves. I'll give you some in the morning, and some balm. You should put it on tonight before bed." "Thanks." "Hey," he said, looking into the fire. I saw you last night." She looked at him. "I saw you with Mr. Lawland. I saw him take you to his cabin." She directed her gaze back to the fire. "Did he touch you?" No answer. "It's okay," he said. "You can tell me." She shook her head. "He told me not to tell anyone or he would hurt me." "That's not true. He's not going to hurt you anymore." He looked at her, tried to make eye contact. "Do you believe me?" he asked her. "That he's not going to hurt you anymore?" "You can't tell Mr. McGuire." "We're not going to tell Mr. McGuire," he said. "We're not going to tell anyone." 3 days later, Camp Montague was back to normal, post-trek week normal. It took all of Thursday for the campers to pull the canoes from the river and store them in the giant hangar that stored all things Montague. Life vests, helmets, paddles, and tents were cleaned, dried, and stowed for next year's trek. The cleanup took 2 days, but by mid-afternoon on Friday, the camp looked back to its usual self, and there was some rare downtime at Camp Montague, where no activities were planned, and the kids had an open afternoon and evening. They went about the afternoon without drawing attention to themselves. They had spent the second and third night of Trek Week plotting and brainstorming until they'd come up with the perfect plan. At 3:00 p.m., they met behind the crafts shed, a long log cabin where wood crafting projects took place. "Everything we need should be in the back supply closet," he said. "What do we need?" she asked. "Probably just a pair of pliers, but I'll grab a few other tools just in case." The supply closet was an organized maze of tools. Hammers and screwdrivers hung in organized rows from pegboard. Several red Craftsman tool cabinets lined the back wall, their drawers filled with screws and nails. They went to the wall and grabbed a pair of slip-joint pliers, a hammer, and a flathead screwdriver. "This ought to do it." He looked at her. "Okay. Stay away from your cabin. I'll meet you in the clearing at 10. She nodded. Chapter 54. Washington, D.C., Tuesday, May 30th, 2023 10:45 a.m. Jacqueline Jordan placed her shoulder bag on the conveyor belt and watched as it made its way through the X-ray machine. A security guard stared at a monitor on the other side of the metal detector and inspected the bag's contents, looking for weapons and contraband. Jacqueline had been through the process before. It was the same at nearly every prison she visited, and she'd visited the Central Detention Facility in D.C. many times during her years at Lancaster and Jordan. She passed through the metal detector without incident and stretched her arms out to her sides for the guard to run a wand up and down her body. "Thank you, ma'am," the young prison guard said with a smile. Jacqueline collected her bag, hung it over her shoulder, and followed another guard through a set of locked doors until she was shown into the visitors section of the prison. She had requested, and was granted, a private room for that morning's meeting. After all, she had claimed that it was the first meeting with her new client. They would need as much privacy as possible. The guard opened the door to the meeting room and showed her inside. She took a seat in one of the two chairs and unpacked her folder from her bag, placing it on the table in front of her. 10 minutes later, an inmate wearing an orange jumpsuit was shown into the room. Jacqueline recognized the confusion on his face as he stared at her. She was a complete stranger to him. The guard clipped the man's handcuffed wrists to an eye bolt at the edge of the table. "You've got 30 minutes, the guard said. "If you need something sooner, press the buzzer." "Thank you," Jacqueline said, and smiled as the guard left them alone. "Who are you?" Reece Rankin asked. "I'm your attorney," Jacqueline lied. "You ain't the lady I met with before. She was a public defender, assigned to you by the court." "That's 'cause I ain't got no money for a real lawyer. You a real lawyer?" "I am." Rankin smiled, displaying badly decayed and yellow teeth. "How you think I'm gonna pay you if I don't got no money?" "My firm takes a limited number of pro bono cases. That means we work on your behalf but don't ask for compensation in return. So don't worry about money. Just concentrate on answering a few questions for me. Afterward, I'll let you know if I can help you." "Pro bono?" "That's right," Jacqueline said. "Would you be willing to answer a few questions for me?" Rankin nodded, and Jacqueline was content knowing she had scaled her first obstacle. Like Alex, he too was suspicious of the Reece Rankin development. It would be something much greater than coincidence that a random pervert from Maryland happened to rape and kill a girl who was about to unleash an explosive story that would rock the lives of more than a few powerful people. "The police claim that you've confessed to killing Laura McAllister. Is that true?" "Yeah, I signed the papers even. But that was only because they said they believed me when I told them somebody paid me to kill her. They said if I signed a confession, it would help them with the rest of the investigation, and I'd do less time." "But you did kill her," just said as much. "But it wasn't your idea." "Shit, no. Didn't even know who the bitch was." Jacqueline paused at the man's crassness, but decided to ignore it and moved on. She needed to keep him on track. "So why did you do it? Why did you kill Laura?" "'Cause they gave me a bunch of money and promised I'd get more after I did it." "Someone paid you money to kill Laura McAllister? You got some kind of hearing problem, lady? Why you keep repeating what I say?" "You told this to the police? That someone paid you?" "Yeah. They said if I copped to killing the girl, I'd get off easier 'cause I was paid." "Did they ask who paid you?" "Nah, we didn't get into that yet. They said I had to sign the papers first, the confession, then we'd get into the details. But I signed those papers a long time ago, and ain't never seen a cop since. Figured maybe that's why you showed up out the blue." "Do you know the name of the man who paid you to kill Laura McAllister?" "Nah, I just saw a bunch of cash and they told me what they needed. I didn't ask no questions." "They? There was more than one man." "Yeah, a kid did most of the talking, but there was another guy with him. He never talked though. He just sort of stayed in the background." Jacqueline opened her folder and removed a photograph of Matthew Claymore. She slid it across the table. "Is this the kid you spoke with?" The man looked at the photo for a moment and shook his head. "Nope, that ain't him." Jacqueline retrieved another photo. This one was of Duncan Chadwick. She slid it in front of the man and waited. "Yep," the man said, nodding his head and smiling with his yellowed teeth. "That's him. Real arrogant sumbitch." "You're sure? Sure as shit." Jacqueline slowly pulled the photo of Duncan Chadwick away and replaced it in her folder, along with the photo of Matthew Claymore, then slipped the folder back into her bag. "The other person," Jacqueline said, "was it someone his age?" "Another student?" "No, older guy. Sorta got the impression the older guy was actually in charge, but the kid was doing all the talking." Jacqueline pulled out her phone and logged onto her search engine. She scrolled for a few minutes until she found a good photo, zoomed in on it, and held her phone out for Reece Rankin to see. "Is this the other man who paid you to kill Laura McAllister?" The man squinted his eyes and smiled. "That's him, no doubt about it." Jacqueline pulled her phone away and looked at the image of Larry Chadwick for only a moment before closing the browser and placing the phone in her bag. "They were the ones that gave me that backpack too," Rankin said. "I was supposed to leave it by the girl's body because it would throw the cops off. That's what they said." Jacqueline offered a smile. "Yeah, but you left more than the backpack. You left your DNA all over Laura McAllister's body. Skin cells, pubic hair, your fucking semen. So you see, dumping an innocent kid's backpack after the fact wasn't really going to fool anyone." Jacqueline stood and walked toward the door. "So you gonna help me now that I told you all that?" Jacqueline turned before pressing the buzzer. "Maybe," she said. "One more thing, though. These men who paid you to kill Laura McAllister, did they tell you to rape her too?" "Yeah," he said with a shrug. "Supposed to look like a crime of passion. That's what the kid said. I didn't want to do it, but you know." "Money talks. I'm just being honest with you. If you're gonna be my attorney, I gotta be honest, right?" "Right," Jacqueline said as she pressed the buzzer. "You gonna help me now? Be my attorney?" The door opened, and a guard waited for Jacqueline to exit the room. Before she did, she turned back to Reece Rankin. "You need a priest a hell of a lot more than you need a lawyer."